Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Two Comma Coffee Club. Today, we are speaking about living in the end, and it is part two. If you missed part one, you can find it on YouTube, so go check it out. Today, I want to start with something a little bit different. So, we're talking about living in the end. When I was thinking about living in the end today and what we would talk about, an idea came to me about how humans think about the end, as in what is the end. And for many of us, that's death, and it's something many people fear. And Neville is fearless, and you have to be fearless when you are setting out your scenes or your imagination. You're using your imagination to manifest your desires. And so I took a little look and I came across Neville's lecture called Brazen Impudence.
Impudence. Yeah, that's one of my favorites, actually. I love that lecture.
And he talks about his 17-year-old nephew that was terminally ill with cancer. And it was his sister's eldest child. And he knew she felt and wondered, well, he was wondering how he could comfort his sister when she was over 2,000 miles away, okay? She was in New York City. So he was in New York City, and in his bedroom, he closed the door and decided to lay down and do some state akin to sleep. And he imagined a scene. So I'm just going to read it. So while in New York City, I went to my bedroom, I closed the door, and I lay down on my bed, knowing that my sister lived in the old family house in Barbados. I assumed I was on the bed where I knew Billy to be. Billy's his 17-year-old nephew.
Mm-hmm.
I assumed my sister entered that room but couldn't see her son, only her brother Neville. My sister Daphne entered the room. Looking startled, she came forward and stared at me and then turned and left the room. When I was satisfied I had seen her and she had seen me and not her son, I broke the experience and returned to my living room to be with my wife and a friend who had come for cocktails. Okay. 10 days later, he received a letter from his sister in which she said, Nev, I can't understand it, giving the day and the hour which coincided with the very moment she saw Neville in her son's room. I went into Billy's room and I was startled to see you there. I knew you were in New York City, yet I could not see Billy on the bed, only you. I must confess I was afraid, so I left the room, and when I returned, I could see Billy again. She could see Billy. By then, Billy's departed these 10 days later. And what Neville was saying was he gave the scene such sensory vividness with all tones of reality that he was truly seen by his sister 2,000 miles away. He didn't go there to save Billy. He died. But his presence convinced his sister that her son was not made of flesh and blood. If her brother in New York City could appear to her in Barbados at the exact time he imagined it, she knew without any doubt or any fear that we truly are all imagination.
Yes.
And it just, I loved it. I just totally loved it. And he wanted her to realize that her son Billy is never dead. He will never die because he is made up of the spirit within. He is made up of God, he's made up of the imagination. So when you are coming from the end, you got to totally know that there is nothing to fear, and without any doubt know that what you wish is going to be true, or accept that it already is, because it lives in imagination.
Yes. And you know what that story reminds me of? Have you ever heard of remote viewing?
Yeah, the military originally used it, and there was someone who had, I think, taught it in the military, who was offering it as a course. I forget the fellow's name, but I came across that a number of years ago.
Mm-hmm. So it's a real big thing with conspiracy theorists, because they just on the conspiracy theory side, and that's where I had heard of it, is the powers that be. They remote view into your world to spy on you, essentially, right? So like, I can see how people could freak out about that, especially if you have some sort of anxiety disorder. Like, that sounds terrible. But aside from that, if you really think about what remote viewing is, it's as if I would sit here and, knowing that Michelle is in England, I am seeing the world from her. What does it feel like to be there in England? What would I be seeing? What would I be doing? And so, yes, from where I'm sitting here in Texas, I can say, yes, I remote viewed into Michelle, and therefore I know what she's up to, what she's looking at, what all this other stuff, right? So you can see how people could be like a little like, ugh, like, but if you think about it, you can literally do that with anybody.
Of course you can.
Right?
It's kind of like spiritually, when you're working spiritually, they call them out of body experiences. And I think in witchcraft, they call them something else, but I'm not quite sure.
Yes. Can I offer from a perspective I have from studying Hinduism for many, many years? There is a practice called bilocation, BILOCATION. To bilocate means to literally be in two places at once. And this is usually done by what they call like a living saint, someone who comes into this world already a highly realized being. They know they're not the body. They just sort of hang out in the body, and they show up here and they show up there. But this one in particular, who was a very beloved living saint, he would travel around India, but he was known to sometimes be in more than one place at once. He'd be with the villagers in one little little village, and while they were serving food or something, and then he'd show up at another site, 500 miles distant, and it was just considered a quality that only those kinds of beings possessed. Well, Neville had advanced so much, and from his direct experiences of knowing he wasn't just this flesh and blood limited to the body, he knew how to practice that. And it's really something that is available to anyone who is a serious student of this and really wants to get into that feeling. It's something I believe is achievable. I've often thought of, gee, I wish I could bilocate just to get everything done in my day. But that's another kind of multitasking. I kind of haven't done. I've been working on it, but it hasn't happened. But in terms,
I needed to do that yesterday.
I'm picking up the groceries and doing my yoga practice at the same time. But it's really, it is something that can be done. So when the sister actually went, but she was startled, but he knew he could do it because he of course was very in it.
He was very active in practicing it, and he actually called it an art. And in this section of the same lecture, it says, in New York City, my telephone was in the hallway, my chair in the living room. So whilst I sat in my chair, I would assume I was at my telephone. Then I would assume I was looking into the living room. I practiced this exercise until I discovered I could move anywhere in a split second of time. You must test it, you must try it. And like my sister, someone will have the very strange experience of seeing you where you have never physically been. Make it fun. I do it all the time. This is another way to prove that there is an immortal you that can never die. And it's fascinating. So if you want to ever put it in practice and living from the end, when we talk about creating the imaginal scene, for example, and living from your end, really put yourself somewhere and really practice it until you really feel that you really are there.
Yeah, because you really are there. I mean, that just proved it.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. The imagination is the only reality, isn't it?
Well, you know, the other thing is, Michelle and I'm not sure about Lene too, have been, you know, Reiki, practiced Reiki, which means universal life force energy in Japanese. And that practice is typically done, you know, the way you would give, say, body work, but you wouldn't move your hands on the person, you just hold them in positions. But there is a component of Reiki. And of course, now we'd say that's secondary cause because you're giving your power to that to heal. But from the subject we're covering today, there's an aspect of it called distance healing. And work on me, and I can say, sure, you're in Chicago and I'm here in Florida. Let's just make this happen. And I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to buy a ticket. And imagine, essentially, it really comes back to imagining. Initially, you're taught it's not, you don't think of it that way, but yes, but you do. And you can position your hands a certain way that you believe you're imagining that you're feeling that energy moving through you into that person's, you know, back while they're sitting in their easy chair in Omaha, and you know, and their backache is gone. And they often do, they will feel it. Say, I'm going to be doing this at 3:15, be there, you'll feel it. And they report, because they're imagining, they're already set up to imagine they're receiving it.
Yep.
And then they'll come back and tell you how great that was and how much better they're feeling, or how well they slept, or something like that. So that sense of being able to transmit or move energy over a distance, or, you know, it's not the mileage distance, but it's, you know, you might say it's cosmic, but it's imagined that is able to happen.
Exactly. So from what Lene has said about the remote viewing, from what I've mentioned that Neville done, from Reiki, from having out of body, all of it is termed so differently. It all has different terminology, but it all comes down to the same thing, and that is imagination. And when you're doing that remote healing of Reiki, you are coming from an end because you're imagining that person is well.
Well, that's the other thing, right? You start with that idea that you're going to make them well, but you can also start that they already are. And that's why some of the people we know in the community, the Neville community, who do acupuncture, they're starting the session before they even put a needle in the person. They're already seeing them as well. And one person said that they are, instead of the client needing 3 sessions, they did it in 1 session because they had already gone in and seen that result. So this is really important. Now, there's another aspect to what you're saying, Michelle, that kind of takes us into the realm of a man named Walter Russell, who, I don't know if he was I don't know enough about his background, but 2020, our mentor, has talked about him, and he wrote a number of books. Maybe he practiced physics or something, but he was more of a scientist and researcher, and he wrote a book called Universal Mind, and it's one of the best-selling books that you can find on Amazon, as a matter of fact. And I read an excerpt from it, and I was absolutely fascinated, because essentially, you know, there is really only the one mind, which doesn't move. So anything that we believe is moving, including the physical, the energy, like a Reiki energy or remote viewing, bilocating, any of the things we've been talking about, in a sense, are an illusion. Anything that moves is an illusion, because there is only the mind itself. But because the mind itself, which thinks and does other certain things, but it would kind of be like I'm going to give it an alliterative name. I call it the beautiful beatific blob. In a sense, it's something that is just going to be there, but it doesn't have motion. It doesn't have anything, because that's really the source. It just is. It just is. So anything else that comes from that, it's an illusion. It's an illusion that we need we kind of use for the purposes of imagining. That movement of imagination, oddly, is a kind of an illusion, but a very significant illusion. So Walter Russell is very fascinating. You may say, well, that's meaningful or it's not meaningful, but it's just something to kind of throw into the mix. It's something I'm just tossing into the hopper.
There was when we talk about spiritual stuff, some people say to me, okay, well, seeing is believing. Well, to me, that's the physical. When the imagination, if imagination is the only reality, then the physical, we know that the physical comes after. So when they say seeing is believing, and I always say to them, close your eyes. And they go, why? And I just touch the hand like this. And I say, what am I doing? And they say, touching my hand. I said, how do you know? Because I felt it. So seeing isn't believing then, because you know that I just touched your hand.
Good one.
Right.
I like that.
So so the truth is behind Neville, imagination is the only reality, but also at the same time, feeling is believing. So if you felt it, then you believe it to be true.
Yeah.
And that's the end.
Yeah.
Something
And
yeah.
Do I? No, go on. I was going to move our conversation on, but you're going to. I
was going to say on that, when thinking of, or not thinking of the end, right? You don't want to think of the end. You want to feel as if you're in the end, live as if you're in the end. And I noticed something because I've been working on a project, and simultaneously feeling the end of that project in its fulfillment. And I was getting frustrated because I'm like, I don't feel it. Like, I was being honest with myself that, okay, I don't feel like I'm in the end. I clearly know I'm thinking of the end, right? And so I started getting like frustrated about it. So I just, anytime you're frustrated, just know it's just a state. You just surrender to it. You're just like, okay, today I'm frustrated. Like, what am I going to do? Sit here and fight myself? So once you just let that go and just accept it, then you're like, okay, I can move now. And so when I noticed that, I surrendered to my frustration and just let it be. I took a step because I thought, okay, if I was in this end, what would I be doing right now? And I did it. And then it was, oh, this is what the end feels like. And now I know, like, in my experience, I'm not there yet, but I already feel it, and I'm already on that bridge of incidents. So like, I just hopped in a cab and I'm just on my way, like that's what it feels like. Right? It took me having to just, okay, here's the end. Obviously, if I was living in this end, I wouldn't be sitting in my bed wondering what the hell is next to do. I would just do it. And as soon as I did it, it was like, boom, I'm in the state, I'm in the end, smooth sailing. There we are, you know? And I feel it now. I felt it every day. So now I know it's concrete and, you know, and so that's literally it. And like I mentioned in the last video, you're always doing this. You're always doing this. This is nothing new. It's nothing new to think, you know, today I'm like, I want a freaking burrito. What is a practical step? Oh, Chase is driving right now. He's not at the house, so he can pick me up a burrito. Hey, can you get me a burrito? Sure. Here's my burrito in my lap 15 minutes later. But like people don't think like of that as manifest. You just think of, oh.
No, they don't.
No, I clearly in my mind was like, ooh, eating a burrito sounds so good. And and all of that. How do I get a burrito? Well, there's the quickest route. So,
see,
I digress. That's all I wanted to say.
I also think that, well, let me give you an example. Like I told you just before we got online, yesterday was so hectic. I was working my day job all day, and my two youngest children were both then meant to have swimming lesson at 4:30. So they finished school at 3:20. They have a swimming lesson at 4:30, and I had to get to Plymouth, which is about a 30 to 45 minute drive depending on traffic, for my son's football trials last night. And I also had to feed the four children and do everything that mums need to do all in between. And I was thinking, holy shit, how am I going to actually fit all of this in? And I started to feel stressed, and I started to panic, and I started to think, fuck, man, this is all on me. I've got to try and fit all of this into the day. How am I going to do it? And so I just stopped and thought, okay, I'm just going to imagine myself in bed at the end of this day thinking, yes, man, I did it, and it went so much smoother than I thought. And so that's exactly what I did. It just took a second, like just seconds. And I thought afterwards, well, it'll work out, fuck knows how, but it's gonna work out. And then I contact the swimming instructor, and he says to me, Michelle, really don't worry. This is important. So for the next 2 weeks, I'll just credit your account, and we'll just add the swimming lessons onto the end, or onto your next batch of swimming lessons. Don't worry. And I went, oh my God, you do that for me? Like, how many people would say, well, sorry, you've paid, we can't replace them now, so you're gonna have to just miss out. But no, he added the swimming lessons on and told me not to worry about it. And then I was expected food shopping, and I wasn't able to get there on time, and it arrived late, and so could I go and collect it the following day? And I just thought, oh my God, that's worked out easy. And then we were so on time that we were 20 minutes early, and I got the last parking space.
Yeah.
And I got into bed and was like, wow, man, that thank God that worked. It worked. And I went to bed tired, but I went to bed knowing that I'd managed to fulfill everything that was needed in that day.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
Another thing that I use quite often is when you want to live in the end is the state of thankfulness. So you don't know how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen or whatever, but I just imagine just saying thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
You know? And it's a really simple thing. And I got my new Neville book today. It's Neville Infinite Potential. It's a fabulous book. Really like it. And he he actually uses the state of feeling grateful, and he says somebody questioned him in Live Boldly, and they asked, I would think that if you get too much into the sleepy state that there would be a lack of feeling. So Neville says, when I speak of feeling, I do not mean emotion, but acceptance of the fact that the desire is fulfilled.
Yep.
Feeling grateful, fulfilled, or thank you is as easy to say thank you, or isn't it wonderful, or I'm glad that's finished. When you get into the state of thankfulness, you can either awaken knowing it's done or fall asleep in the feeling of the wish already being fulfilled. And when you're living in the end, I think you're, for whatever reason, you're thankful for it.
Yeah.
Like
I feel that. Yeah. I can wholeheartedly say that with my project that I'm living in the end of. You know, it's like I'm already so freaking grateful, and grateful for the path, you know,
Yeah.
the incidents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Do
But you
that.
know, the other thing too is it's funny when you flash that book title, Infinite Potential. And that was from the title of a Neville, that is Neville's, but that wasn't something somebody else called. That's actually Neville's own title, correct? I believe it is. Yes.
Yeah.
So back in, like, I'm thinking way back now to maybe the 80s. I think this was started in the 80s. There was something called the Human Potential Movement. And you may have heard of it. And there were certain, you know, people out there who were known to be like thought leaders. They didn't call them thought leaders then, but they were like leaders and facilitators of getting people to kind of wake up that there was more to what they could attain in life. But the other thing is, when you are, I think when he says infinite potential, I think we have to also look at potential as a kind of, you're actually accomplishing something. You know, otherwise sometimes you can feel, you know, have I lived to my potential? Well, what happens when will I ever get there? Is this something that's always going to be like a carrot on a stick? Am I always going to be kind of, you know, hoping to reach that? Is this something that I have to, is my reach beyond what I'm reaching for beyond my grasp? Is it something I am meant to have? Or am I always going to be one of those people who never quite
gets there?
Never quite gets there.
Why do they always get it and I don't?
Why do they always get? So when Neville talks about infinite potential, I'm sure, and I may have read this one at one point, but it's definitely something to go back. You know, seeing that, I definitely want to read that again. Is really that it's infinite, because he's really saying there is nothing that is outside the realm of what you can have. And I think that's the thing to keep in mind, because otherwise I think people can feel, oh, I've reached a certain stage in life, and if I haven't achieved by now what my, you know, my world-shaking goals were when I was 23 and 32, and, you know, the things I hope to accomplish are behind me. Neville says, no, don't give up on that, on yourself, and decide and try to logic it out that you're in the time sequence you've been physically inserted into here, but that it's the capacity to achieve is not limited by your physical condition or by your age or any of those things. So this is really, I think, the heart of what Neville is saying.
There are people limited. Sorry, Val. It's limited by your imagination.
Exactly. That's perfect. That's perfect. It's limited only by your imagination. So that you know, if you have that attitude, like, oh, that part of my life is all past, there's nothing left for me. No, it's not true at all. If you and so that you can always be excited by that idea that there is still potentially something else that you can imagine.
Yeah.
And that's what he defines as sinning, is going against your desires. Clearly, if you're 80 years old and still have that desire that you had at 23, it's go time.
Yes.
Let's do
Go. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I know there was this man who was in his early 90s, and he had I don't know if he had been a writer and author before, but a manuscript he had submitted. I think he really got into it after his wife died. And something he had submitted to a literary agency was in their slush pile. And if anyone in our audience is familiar with that, that's all the manuscripts that are just sent by aspiring authors to either to publishing houses or to agents in the hope of being read and possibly getting a book contract. And his manuscript was pulled from the slush pile. And they saw the potential in it. He got published, and he did a whole bunch more books. His best work was after the age of 90.
Yeah.
See?
Yes. I actually just today on LinkedIn saw a post, and it said my grandpa put all of his poems that he wrote all throughout his life. He put them all together into one book and published it on Amazon, on KDP. And he's 85.
Yeah.
So he used that entire time. He could have been, after writing the poems, he could have been 40, like, oh my God, what am I doing? No, 85 years old, decides I'm putting them all together in a book. And I just thought that was so beautiful, because it just shows it does not freaking matter where you're at in life, what age you are, what the fuck you got going on, your circumstances, nothing. All it takes is that decision. You just say, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And you're there.
Yeah.
That's right.
You're there.
You just stop listening, to all the doubts, and you imagine.
Shut the hell up. I don't want to hear it. I'm doing my thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, never ending. It's never ending. That's why it means infinite potential. So people should never feel that they've exhausted their potential.
Yeah. And if you're just living in the end where you're just feeling that, who's stopping you from that? Not your 90-year-old body, not your handicapped body, not any of that, to sit and feel what that would be like. Because that's the thing you're wanting anyway. You want that feeling. You think, when I get there, I'll have that feeling. Well, no, just have that now. And you can have that regardless of where the hell you are.
There are some very simple things that we've mentioned today that people can use at home, even just by saying thank you. It doesn't mean, when I always remember when I was working spiritually, if you have to have gratitude for every little thing that you have, and how lucky you are that you have a roof over your head, and how lucky you are that you have food in the cupboard, and that you must be thankful for every little thing that you have. Well, I am thankful, but I've really got to be honest, because if I had everything I wanted, I wouldn't need to consciously manifest. So if I had everything I wanted, let's face it, I probably would have moved on in life by dying. I'm done. My content in this life is done. So it's not until you realize that by having gratitude means be thankful as if it were true, be thankful as if it were real, and use that as a way of manifesting your wish fulfilled. Having gratitude is a sign, not a sign, we're not having signs, but for me, being thankful and knowing that I've got it is a sign to me that I'm living from the end.
Yes, exactly. And something people don't think about, especially if you grew up in a hella religious family, why not be thankful for your desire? it's showing you clearly what you're wanting. And
Yeah,
that you're
exactly.
looking
Follow
at
it.
That's great. Yeah,
there. Be
that's
thankful
right.
for that. If you're gonna be
Absolutely.
thankful for, because I went through the, oh man, I must be an ungrateful bitch because I want this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't, this is not good enough. And
Yeah.
because I was desiring more for myself. And so just shifting gears and just being like, fuck, I'm so thankful that there's even more for me.
Yeah. The
And then you know what?
opportunity.
You're like where you're at, then you really can feel the thankfulness. Like I'm on my way to better things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh man.
So
I
this,
love
yeah.
this. This is so like beautiful to me.
We
It's a
can.
fantastic topic.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, it really is. When I remember when in one of Neville's lectures, I can't think what one it was, but he was asked by somebody at the end of his lecture about that they felt guilty because they were after financial security
Mhm.
and a relative died and they then inherited the money. Now, I don't know if it was, he talks about that in various
Yeah.
lectures, but when I came across it in this book, he answers it so well that if security came to me through the death of a loved one, did I bring about that death?
Mhm.
Do not think for 1 second that you brought about a death by assuming security. The greater you is not going to injure anyone because it sees all, and knowing the length of life, it can inspire the other to give you that which can fulfill your assumption. You didn't kill the person who named you in his will. If a few days after you complete acceptance of the idea of security, Uncle John made his exit from this three-dimensional plane and left you his estate, it is only because it was time for Uncle John to go. He didn't die 1 second before his time.
Yeah.
The greater you saw the lifespan of John and used him as the way to bring about the fulfillment of your feeling of security. The acceptance of the end wills the means toward the fulfillment of that end. Do not be concerned with anything other than the end. Always bear in mind that the responsibility to make it so is removed from your shoulders because it is yours, because you accept that it is so. So, like yesterday, when I worried about and panicked about, oh my God, how am I going to do all of this? When you then eradicate all of the worry, the doubt, the fear of, God, how am I going to split myself into many pieces being a mum? It just, when you surrender to the feeling of that end, then there is no guilt, there is no fear, and there is no doubt, and that nobody should think that they brought about any bad by manifesting their desire, because there's a lot of people that do feel guilty and think that they don't deserve it. And so when they get it, they're then not thankful because they're scared of what they've received.
Yeah, exactly. And I've gone through that too, thinking, well, I mean, it's just, think about when you're working with clients and they're paying you. Initially, there was some sort of like guilt to that, but I'm like, nobody's feeling guilty for using my time. Why am I feeling guilty for charging? You know, like,
Yep.
It's that weird thing. You're like, where the hell is this coming from? And I just blame Catholic guilt when anytime stuff like that comes up, because that's the only thing I can think of that like was programmed in my mind, you know, where I should feel guilty about everything. And the funny thing about that is, and I recommend anybody out there watching this, if you have that guilt, you need to identify that and get rid of it, because it's not serving you in any freaking way. Like, goodbye.
That's what he says. Just let that go and just remain in the end, because you are not responsible for how it happens.
Yes. And I feel like even there's been things that I've thought of like living in the end of, or like my desires, where I had that like guilt, even feeling guilty of imagining it, which is ridiculous, right? It's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Think about it. But when you actually say, I'm so thankful my desire is showing me what I really want, when you freaking shift and say that shit, boom, guilt gone.
Yeah. That's a beautiful feeling. Yeah.
Teaches the opposite of that, right? Well, it's the shadow world, right? So like it's saying, oh, sinning is going after your desires, because Lord knows there's a lot of desires that you shouldn't have. And for some reason the church gets to dictate, oh yeah, that's a good desire, good job there, go ahead and go for that one. Oh nope, that one's shitty, you should probably not do that when you're going to go to hell. You should probably come get water thrown on you. You need to go to confession 55 times this year. You know, like that's literally what
Neville didn't drink. He didn't eat meat until Abdullah said he taught Neville how to manifest, didn't he, by living in the end?
Yes.
And he told him to imagine that he was in Barbados because that's where he wanted to be for Christmas. He ended up in Barbados. Despite Neville's doubts, Abdullah kept shutting the door and saying, you were in Barbados, but when you return, you will have died. Mm-hmm. And Neville at the time didn't get it. He was like, well, what does he mean I'm going to die? And only when he returned by boat did he start to drink. He ate meat on the boat back. And then when he arrived back, Abdullah said, see, you died. Because the old Neville died. But not only did he die and be reborn, as you like, because he decided he'd eat meat, that he would accept all of his desires that he had sacrificed or pushed away and rejected. He ended up rejecting the rejection of them.
Yes.
And he also awakened to what consciously manifesting could do. So he died many times during that trip, I think, and and that was when he truly learned what your imagination was all about, because he had put this stuff on himself that he would only be good if he didn't eat meat, he'd only be good if he didn't drink, and yet he was denying himself all of his desires. And it was just like what you were saying, and so many people tend to do that.
Yes. Well, that's right. And, you know, people have this idea, there is this idea about, you know, making yourself pure and purification. And sometimes that gets over translated into fasting and other things that may or may not be healthy for everybody to do in the way that they do it. And, you know, thinking, you know, what is it that they're seeking in that? And it really, if the end goal is, I want to feel closer to God, then you're right there. You know, you don't need to go anywhere.
You can't be any further away because you're denying yourself.
Exactly.
It's about living in the end.
Yeah.
You already are. There you are.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. You're right there. So that's all you need to have.
Moving forward, I just want to talk to everybody yet again about the Neville Summit.
Yeah.
We are there with a bunch of wonderful Neville teachers, and we are going to be doing Banish Your Anxieties, and we are going to be teaching you how
money anxieties.
Yeah, your money anxieties, and how to eradicate your fears and doubts so that you may live from a state of wealth. And
I just gave a hint a little while ago.
What? What did you do?
I said I gave a hint about the guilt.
Yeah, we did. We just briefly touched that, didn't we? Yeah. And so please come and join us, because a state of wealth doesn't mean just money, although it helps, right? Living from a state of richness and living from a state of wealth means that you are already living in your end. Yeah. And so we'll be teaching that, and it's all very simple. So please come and join us. We will put our link for you to get your tickets in the description. We will be having some of our future guests are going to be from the Neville Summit. Yeah.
Yes.
Who are the teachers?
Well, we will be bringing on other people. I don't want to say the names yet because we're still working on the scheduling.
And it's
But we already have had on 2020, and we've had on David Breslow. We've had on Jen Miller, Coach Jen. So they're all going to be
Anya.
we may be replaying some of those prior to the summit so people can familiarize themselves with these awesome teachers, and some of the others that are still that we're still planning the scheduling on. So that coming up soon. It's a great lineup.
But the tickets are really limited. There is only a certain amount of availability for our classes. So you really must get in there and book them now so that you can save your seat. Don't think I'll do it later. Live from the end and know that you're already there by getting your ticket now.
Yeah.
And your ticket, you can register through any of the, when you go on the site, you'll see all the presenter profiles. You just need to click on one and that will take you to where you can register for the entire summit.
Yep.
Yes. Especially if you want ours, click on ours. All of our faces appear on it and it says banish your money anxieties and click on the link.
Exactly.
Well, living in the end is a really huge topic, but I really, really trust that we've covered so much in the last 2 episodes about living from the end that people realize that this truly is the secret. Feeling is the secret, but you've got to be able to live in your end in order to manifest your desires.
Yep.
Totally. It's the end is the place to be.
The end is the beginning.
The end is the beginning, exactly.
All right. So till next time, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.